Welcome to our third weekend of Teacher of the Year interviews, and I should call them conversations. They're not really interviews, with all the teachers representing schools in St. Lucie County where they have been nominated for their peers for the 2011 Teacher of the Year. Now you might wonder why we say 2011 when this is obviously 2010. It's because the whole process takes quite a long time, and the Teacher of the Year for the state of Florida will not be named until next June. So we're not wrong, it's for 2011. Now we have with us from Southport Middle School, Nancy Filippini, who teaches world cultures at the school, and her principal, Dr. Mary Mosley. Thanks to both of you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having us.
Thanks. Well, world cultures, that just really crosses everything that humans do, whether it's government, whether it's culture, whether it's how people treat each other. Now the cultures part, I imagine, is you really focus in on that as part of the social studies experience.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
Does that mean you go back to, I don't know how far back you go, but let's say you go to the classics in Florence for art, and then you know, Russia for the novels, and is that what world cultures mean?
Right, we start with the first civilizations.
Okay.
First when they were nomads traveling for food, and then the first civilizations that they have on record settled. Okay. You know, from Mesopotamia. And then we go on, right, then we go on to
Incas, and you go that far into the Incan, and what's the other, Mayan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's also in the scope and sequence. That's a little further
down the road.
Right.
What do you enjoy, maybe I should better ask, what do the students seem to grasp onto the most with you? And I'm sure if you've been doing this more than 1 year, you see kind of a theme here, that they seem to like one culture better than the other because of how, you know, they may be technologically savvy with no technology, basically.
Right. They really like ancient Egypt. Oh. I think, you know, King Tut and the mummies, and we do hands-on projects with that, so they really like that.
Did you introduce the King Tut song?
No.
No. Maybe she's too young. We'll remember what that one is.
I don't know what the King Tut song is, but I'd like to learn it, and then I'll
we'll get it to you. That's
I'll be happy to sing that in my classroom.
Whatever that.
Walk like an Egyptian.
Yeah, walk like an Egyptian.
That's the Bangles.
The Bangles, but that was, you know, King Tut was, oh, the comedian. I can't think of his name, but anyway, that was around probably before you were, you know, listening to pop music.
Right.
But also, do you study like hieroglyphics and and also the things that people in those cultures did, like how important cats were, you know, all those kind of things that then kids even can relate to that in their own life. Right. And that's the connection you try to make.
Absolutely. And when we do the unit on ancient Egypt, we do a lot of hands-on projects, and the kids bring in their projects, and they've made cats out of clay, and then they have to go in front of the room and tell the importance of cats. We also do hieroglyphics. I make them do like a tea paper for homework, like and papyrus, I actually to make a papyrus, and I give them like a tea bag, and then when they come in they do the artwork and they do their name in hieroglyphics, and we actually had that in the hallway. And they do, you know, mummies and pyramids and, you know, anything that has to do with Egypt. We have some great projects that we get.
This question's going to take some thought, but middle school kids, their questions, are they just, they're such sponges. I just love middle school kids. I know they ask you all kind of strange questions, or they make all kind of funny comments. Can you think of one that maybe stands out to you of a question that a student asked you, like, well, if you're, you know, mummified, I don't know, just can you think of a...
Right, right, they do. When you tell them how old the mummy is, they think that that's the age of the...
What's inside.
Right, what's inside. And that, no, it's not a 5,000-year-old person that's mummified. So, you know, you get those kind of questions. And, you know, if it's something that I really don't know, because it is a good intellectual question, I tell them that I will find out for them. Because some of them know about all the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. Some of them are really into it. So,
What are some of the kind of projects that you have for them? You mentioned the projects you just mentioned, but do you do things like plays and, you know, the act out the roles of how people were in those times?
Right. The reading teacher, we collaborate together, and I do have a book of ancient Egyptian plays, and we've had in the past where we've done the ancient Egyptian plays, and then the kids go to each classroom and present the plays, and some of them actually dressed up, and you know, so
How
it
many
was
years?
a lot of fun.
How many years have you been teaching, particularly world cultures? Sixth grade?
9, I believe it's 9.
okay, okay.
8 or 9 years.
How far along in the world's history do you get?
It depends. We try to get right past medieval times into the Renaissance. It
Oh,
just
boy.
depends. And then I always schedule
That's a whole
field
year
trip.
by itself.
Right. I schedule a field trip every year to medieval times. So
Oh, great.
We go to medieval times with the
I'm
kids.
surprised they don't really, well, I'm surprised they don't really latch on to medieval times because, you know, there were the knights and there was the fighting and there was,
Right.
there's a lot of movies about that time, you
Right.
know.
They like
and
that
there's
period.
Robin Hood during that time. And
Right, and we do that. Again, we collaborate together, and
Mm-hmm.
the reading teacher will do like Robin Hood and the Knights, and they like all of that, and the torture chambers.
Oh yeah, that's what I was
When we
thinking
go to
on the
medieval
rack,
times,
you know.
then they have all the questions, yes, about the torture chambers.
Now, does that same line of study carry forward in 7th grade and then in 8th grade, so that by the time the continuum of middle school is, you're up to current world cultures?
Well, 7th grade deals with world geography,
Okay.
and then 8th grade is U.S. history.
Okay.
So they, you know, and I also try to incorporate some of that in because every year Southport participates in the DAR.
Oh yeah.
And this year was Transcontinental Railroad. So, you know, I have to try to give them some background knowledge on that as well.
Right.
So-
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how long you've been, well, you said 9 years at this, I don't know if you were teaching before that, but did you, is this a first career? Is it maybe a
This
second
is
career?
a second career.
Okay, I
Yes, it
find
is.
so many of our teachers of that. Where were you working before?
Previous, I'm a criminal justice major, so I
Okay.
was a police officer, and then I was
Wow.
a probation and parole officer here in St. Lucie County.
Okay.
And I did a lot of teaching in that field.
Sure you did.
Training the new hires that came on, you know, telling them about the job. I also did court officer, and my passion is teaching.
Yeah. Well, we're all teachers in one way or another, but even to your peers you were teaching, because I'm sure that you collaborated on how to best handle their job, like you said, with the new recruits that came in.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen you, Dr. Mosley, as Nancy's been talking about her classroom. You've done a lot of nodding. I have a feeling that when you walk into her classroom, it's alive with
It's exciting.
thinking and fun and acting out and learning.
The students really enjoy world cultures.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most popular classes at our school. I think it's because of the projects that they do and the hands-on experiences, and I think the topics that the teachers cover are just innately interesting, and then they pull in other resources besides just the textbook. I know I've seen Nancy, I'm not sure what that, it's like a newspaper or a journal I've
Right.
seen in your classroom, and so the students get different kinds of information, and I've never gone into a world cultures class when I have seen boredom. I just, I
Well,
don't
it's
see
about
it at
people.
all. Yeah, yeah, and they love it. And it's a nice thing to, if you're going to create units with other teachers, especially in reading and language arts,
right.
you can, it lends
Easy
itself to
collaboration.
collaboration.
Right.
And she's with a very strong team, and the Marlins have been together for a while. Basically, the core has been, but they've had some changes. But they really work well with parents. And I have to comment on Nancy's previous background. We joke about it because she has excellent classroom management skills, and everybody calls
It's a side
to
benefit.
her, yes.
That's that steely gaze,
Oh,
and she can look
yes.
at him and say, you better get back in
Right.
line.
And yet, like you say, you're fair but firm, and the kids just really enjoy.
Yeah, and they'll
Being
respond
there.
to that,
Right.
absolutely.
And in social studies, because it's not that type of a quiet classroom, because
Right.
like you say, it's about people and cultures and socialization, and we do map skills and all sorts of hands-on things. So I think they like that because that's they come in and they're a little more relaxed and they can talk. It's not
Right.
like math where they have to have full quiet concentration. So.
Right. Middle school, they like to work together.
They do. They
like
love to work
They
together.
like to move around.
Right.
They don't like to sit and work in silos. And so, and I'm sure that's added to the pleasure that they take in your classroom, because they can not worry about what they have to do and get into what the learning is.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And I also go sit with them at the tables, you know, so I'll move around and sit with them, and they like that. But when I sit down, sometimes they just want to talk about me. You know?
And your previous life, maybe.
They just have questions for me.
Yeah.
You know, all sorts of questions.
Well, that's what sixth grade's about. It's
Right.
about
It's-
exploration.
right.
It's about learning. It's
Right.
about they're not little kids anymore. You know. And I was thinking when you were talking about the subject matters that's easily collaborating, mathematics comes in there too, because you've got the abacus piece. I don't know if you touch on the Far East, and also the way that during medieval times that they calculated and
Right.
and the money that they used. I imagine you touch on that as well.
Yes,
currency.
we do. And I also I do a research period where I do teach math 1 period a day, and I do get those kids, and I do go over to assist the math teacher. Like I said, we collaborate together, and we'll do Roman numerals when we get to ancient
Sure.
Rome, and I have a little booklet where I teach them Chinese. You know, how to say the numbers from 1 to 10 in Chinese.
Oh,
And
I'd like to know that.
so
Well, and it's interesting. Do you have them kind of compare and contrast how the culture of a period, an era, an age, whatever, reflects or doesn't reflect the government of the age, or how if there was tyranny during the time, or well, like the Dark Ages, coming out of the Dark Ages into the Renaissance. I mean, do they kind of weave that together as well?
we
'Cause they're so
try, and
connected.
we use thinking maps, and you know, I try to get their thoughts all on paper, and we try to compare and contrast whether it be two civilizations or the past to the present, and how it ties into, you know, how our government runs today. So.
Days of Cicero and that kind of thing. Well, now, if you look at, are you looking at the novels of the time as well, or is this about the development of the people of the time?
It's mostly about the development of the people
Okay.
and their belief system, their religion, you know, their ways of life.
Do they look at their life and say, wow, you know, ours is so different because
Right. Yes, they do.
in development of how, particularly how children were looked upon, you know, in years past, and then how men and women were looked at differently in different cultures and what their roles and responsibilities were. It's a little different when you look at those
Right.
kind of things. And I imagine that's where the questions come from.
Right. Yeah, they're very interested.
Yeah.
They're very interested. Sometimes we really don't get into, like you say, we don't get into it that deeply. We stay surfaced as to,
Sure.
you know, how people were treated and you know,
Sure,
how
but
they,
I mean, even in some of the developing cultures, the men were the one that went to the market. You
Right.
know, they were the ones they were the hagglers. The women stayed at home, and I just find that so interesting when you look at how roles and responsibilities change relative to civilization, basically. If someone who is in another industry right now or another job, you know, whether they're in law enforcement or not, and they came to you and said, you know, I'm thinking about getting an education, you know, tell me what I need to know. What would you say to them as an encouragement?
I would just say that you have to love children and love your job, and it's every child every day, and that's what your main focus has to be. And you know, once you love your job, then you can be the best at it.
Right.
And you know,
We don't all have to have gotten degrees in education to be
Right.
educators.
Right.
Because, and I mean, this is a second career for me too as well. It's in the media for many years. So it's interesting how when you get to, I found anyway, and I'm sure you did too since you're still here after 9 years, that this is home. You know, because I love being around kids and love being an influence, a good role model for kids. And whenever we talk about this at the district office all the time, if we're having a bad day, let's go out to school. You know, read to kids or something like that.
Right.
Well, I really appreciate the time you spent with us today.
Thank you.
It's been really nice to get to know you.
Thank you.
And Filippini, I'll never forget that name again.
Thank you.
I sure would like to also visit your classroom sometime
Absolutely.
because those
You're welcome to come
projects
anytime.
sound just really appealing visually, and to get, that's the other thing about middle school kids. They'll sit there and talk to you about their projects and what they did, and
Right.
oh, look at this, and here's what I learned, and they're just
Well, we have History Fair coming in on the 20th, so you're welcome to come down and see what
okay.
they did for the History Fair.
20th
right.
of January.
20th of January.
Okay.
History Fair is due.
Yes,
And-
we're all making preparations. I can
Right.
see them in the classrooms now.
Right. So,
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thanks a bunch.
You're welcome.
And we're going to be right back with another teacher, so please stay tuned.